Hi, Angela Wolf here, fashion designer and online instructor, and this entire lesson is on style. This is a great cover-up you can make by draping. It's a square of fabric, and you can see there's little stitches here for your armholes. Let me show you how to make this. To get started, pick a lightweight fabric. I have another option here just so you can see. This is a polyester chiffon. If I can reach my hand in there, you can just barely see my hand, but the drape is gorgeous. Throw it in the wash, the dryer, it never wrinkles. This is a gauze fabric, which you can see through just a little bit more. It drapes beautifully also. So to get started, you need to decide this fabric I found that has an edging. So I have to figure where I want that to go on this design. So basically measure across your body and add, if you look on here, I added about 11, 12 inches from your shoulder out. So I'm just gonna drape this so you can see what's going on. Here's the rectangle. Find the center of the fabric. I have the fabric folded in half. Here's the center. I'm gonna line it up the center with my green marking there. And let's just cut. Cut a hole for our head. Again, this fabric is folded in half. I'm just cutting both sides at the same time for that part. And now I'm just going to drape this on top. There we go. Again, if you don't have a dress form, you can do this, just cut a circle in the center for your head to go over. That's pretty much what I'm doing. Decide how wide you want it on the neckline. Don't go too far because it'll fall off your shoulders. And I'm just turning this as I go. Cutting around. A little snag there. And I'll go back around to this side. When you're all finished, you can take this off of the dress form, lay it on the table, and make sure that your circle is symmetrical, I should say, because this is a little off. But you'll get the idea. Now, if you want a really easy project, put bias binding around that neckline. Finish the edges like I show you how. And we're going to stitch right here to give you armholes. And you're finished. For this one, I cut it down the center from here down to make that opening. Either way, it's very easy. So hold this out, and you have to imagine your armhole is going to go right through here. So measure down, and it has to also get over your body, so you don't want the pins too close. I'm just going to measure down maybe about 12 inches and about 6 inches in from the fabric. Of course, depending on your size, you'll want to adjust that. I'm just going to give myself a few pins to hold this in place. There you go. So I'm going to be stitching from here to here. You could stitch all the way down if you want, but I like to have the side open, and this is why. See how it drapes? Turn this just a little bit. So you can picture what I'm doing. I'm going to stitch from here to here. I end up with an armhole opening, and then this drapes beautifully. So if you want to open one, just cut it all the way down. You can follow the grain line. And if you want it to have a nice straight line, go ahead and do it on the table. I'm just giving you an idea here. All right, so let's go to the table. I want to show you a few things here before we go to the sewing machine. First of all, for where you're going to sew these sleeves, you can see where I put my pins. And because it was draping, it doesn't quite look like everything is perfectly even. So what I want to do is just mark this a little bit. And then line this fabric up because this was a straight rectangle. There you go. So this edge lines up a little bit better. All right, give myself a few pins. And the next thing that you want to do, and I've already cut this out, is cut out on the bias. You can see 45-degree angle. There's the selvage of the fabric. And you can see this was cut. This is the selvage. It's cut on a 45-degree angle. This will be the strap that hangs on the front if you decide to cut it open, or it could be a belt. and then you have another piece for the neckline to finish the neckline. So for the neckline part, you want to take this and press this fabric in half. I think I have it cut about 2 inches wide. That's a pretty safe bias trim. Fold it in half, give it a little pressing, and prep it to be attached to the neckline. And I'm just going to show you little parts that make the sewing of this project easier. I'm not going to sew the entire thing. You'll get the idea. So there's the bias. I have it folded in half and pressed. The next thing that you would want to do is go to the top, and I'm just going to do another little section here for you to see. And to finish the edges, you have a few options. You could run it through the serger with a 3-thread overlock, or I'm going to turn in the raw edge about 1/4 of an inch to a 1/2 an inch, depending on what your fabric is. Give it a pressing, and then turn it in another. Looks like I used actually more, about a 1/2 an inch. Turn it a little bit more, and I'm going to do that all the way around the sides, the bottom, and the center front edge. Because it's all a straight rectangle. It folds in perfectly. So I'm just going to do a little section there. Let's go to the sewing machine and I'll show you the rest of this. All right, I have a straight stitch on here, set to, depending on your fabric, this one's a 2.5 stitch. So first I want to show you how I finish the edges of the entire garment. I've already folded it and pressed it for you. Simply line up your needle right on the edge of that fold here and stitch. Now, if I did this for the next probably 10 minutes, I would have the entire top sewn from end to end. But I just wanted to give you a little visual on this to see what it looks like. So again, you're going to go around the bottom and both of the arm edges. And this is what you have. So from the wrong side, it looks like this. I'm using contrasting thread so you can see it, different colors on the bobbin and the top. And this would be the right side of the garment. So the edges are finished, they won't fray. Again, you could also use a serger. A rolled edge would be very beautiful on this. So let's go ahead and sew that armhole. If you're having a hard time with all the fabric moving around, where are you sewing? What are you doing? This is like such a huge piece of fabric. What you can do is after you lay it down, maybe on a grid, if you have a cutting mat, so you can line it up pretty straight. Use tailor's chalk, mark in that area so you know what you're following. I'm going to use pins as a guide. I'm just going to back stitch and stitch. How much do you close this up? It really depends on you. If you're really nervous, what you can do is baste the stitch, try it on, and make sure you like it first. You could also use a decorative stitch if you really want to be decorative. So I know what you're thinking. Am I stitching from the right side of the garment or the wrong side of the garment? I have the wrong sides of the fabric together, so I'm stitching from the right side of the garment. So that is your side seam. So once I step back up there, you'll see, but this is where your arm will go. Then you have your head. You getting the idea? All right, and I just have a couple more tips for you on here. For the neckline with the bias tape. This always gets a little confusing. I'm just going to do another small area here. So open with the right sides of fabric together. Open your bias tape up. Let's see if I can find my center opening here. Here we go. So this would be my center front. I'm leaving that open. If you have a closed neckline, go ahead and close that bias binding. You're going to attach it just like you would on a blouse or something. And I'm going to just stitch. What I'm stitching is right in the center between that fold and the edge of the fabric. I'm just going to try to get this fabric up here so you can see. Fabric's a little slippery. And you just want to make sure that you're easing in the neckline into the bias binding. So if you don't, it'll stretch out. So if you can notice, I'm pulling this a little tighter and I'm easing in the neckline. If you have a really hard time with that, you could do a stay stitch right around the edge of the neckline to prevent it from stretching out. So that's your first row of stitching. And I flip this up. Now I'm going to the wrong side of the fabric. I'm just doing a little section for you. Fold this in again. And you can make this as narrow as you want. It's your choice for what your taste is. What I'm doing is I'm folding this in, stitching right on the edge. So I'm stitching one edge. You can see my previous stitch line right on the edge of that. So actually both sides are going to look fantastic. And when you get to the end, I'm just going to cut off a little bit here because I started in a little bit too far. When you get to the end, you can just tuck your fold under. Now I would probably press this, but I'm just going to tuck it under so you can see what's going on. Get my fingers out of the way. Okay. So that's how you attach the bias binding all the way around the neckline. So I know it's hard to see on the sewing machine. Let's do a recap. On this top here, this is where I attach the narrow bias trim. If this stretches out on you, before you attach the trim, you could do a narrow stay stitch. Just use a small narrow stitch, like a 2.0, stitch from here down and here down. That will keep that from stretching. Then you can see I went through, folded this under and stitched it just like I showed you. At the corners, I just folded it over and kept stitching all the way around. So this went all the way around the edge, the back, pretty easy. And then this area here, this is where I stitched the seam. So you can put your arm and you have a little break. So that's how simple it is to make a kimono.